All right, now looking at the female reproductive system, again, take a look at the ureters. The ureters where they pass all the way and come into the posterior of the urinary bladder. This is the urinary bladder. The uterus is located superior and somewhat posterior. It's pretty much right on top of the urinary bladder. You can think of it this way. When a woman gets pregnant and the uterus gets larger and larger and larger, you can see, because of the anatomical location of the uterus versus the bladder, why they urinate more, because it's putting more and more pressure on the bladder. So I want to make this clear because students often think this is the bladder and don't know what the heck this is. This is the uterus. And this particular model is showing two ligaments associated with the uterus and the ovaries, and also something else. So what we have anterior here is the uterine ligament. It attaches it to the pelvic bone. The next tube that we see here is the fallopian tube here on both sides. And then, can you see right here where I'm pointing? Okay. The fallopian tube goes over, this is the ovary, and it ends in what are called the fimbriae. And it does not actually touch the ovary in a human being. They just sort of float over the ovary. This is the ovary. The next tube we see right here is the ovarian ligament that connects the ovary to the uterus. That's the internal genitalia. The external genitalia as a whole here is called the vulva. And so we'll look at the different parts of that in just a moment. On the vulva, we'll look at the external is the labia majora, labia minora. That's what we primarily see. And then mons pubis, which actually does mean Mount Pubis, is the anterior part of what's called the vulva. All right, let's open up in the longitudinal section. And we're going to look at the orifices of the female from anterior to posterior. This is the bladder, and so the first orifice or exit is the urethra in the female. See how short the urethra is? That's the most anterior. Just anterior to the urethra is the clitoris. Here we can see labia minora, labia majora. Again, this is the pubic bone. The next orifice is the vagina or vaginal canal. And then the final orifice is the anus. Now let's look at some other parts here. This is the uterus, body of the uterus, fundus of the uterus. Then the neck of the uterus is called the cervix. That's this area here. We have two openings on the cervix. This is the opening to the uterus and then the opening from the vagina. The opening to the uterus is called the internal os. The opening from the vagina is called the external os. And then the canal in between is called the cervical canal. Now let's take a look at the vagina. The vagina has what are called fornices. Basically, the cervix sits down in the vagina like this, okay? And so if you were to take a speculum and look up in the vagina, the cervix would look kind of like a donut because it'll have that opening in it. And so the end or the superiormost part of the vagina surrounds the cervix, and we can call that anterior and posterior fornices. Anterior fornix, posterior fornix. If we were looking at a section, sagittal section, and we saw these two parts, they would be the anterior and posterior fornices. So you see what I mean? It just encircles the cervix. Uterus has a couple layers. It has the serosal layer, it has the muscular layer, and then the inside of the uterus is called the endometrium. Okay, I think that's pretty much it.